Bueno, muy buenos días.
Good morning, everyone, in person and online, to this launching of the 2023 Latin American Economic Outlook Report, Investing for Sustainable Development. My name is Margarinas from the Commission for Business and Productive Development, and we're so pleased to welcome you to these premises at ECLAC in person and online. We're going to begin with the first session of the agenda with the opening and introduction of the main messages regarding the report, and we will begin with a number of videos. First of all, by Daniel Novoa, who is President of the Republic of Ecuador, and second, Matthias Kormann, Secretary General of the OECD. So thank you, and please go ahead. We send warm and affectionate greetings from Ecuador to everyone who makes up and makes possible the 16th edition of the 2023 Latin American Economic Outlook. This year, the report's concept is investing in sustainable development, embracing an ambitious investment agenda to move towards robust, inclusive, and sustainable development. This is a major challenge that must be taken up with firm determination by Latin America's public and private actors in collaboration with their multilateral partners. A few weeks ago, I was sworn in as constitutional president of the Republic of Ecuador, and since then, we've proposed a renewed vision of the country, where we propose to work on the development of public policies focused on the generation of new investments, national as well as foreign, with the objective of closing the existing investment gaps. One of the first actions of this forward-looking new Ecuador was to present a bill to make the country more attractive as an investment destination. It also seeks to generate employment for young people by providing opportunities for these new generations. And with this decision, we're taking steps towards strengthening the Ecuadorian economy, attracting public-private investment, boosting growth, and creating jobs under sustainable development parameters for all our communities. As I said in my inaugural speech, we cannot keep repeating the policies of the past, hoping for a different outcome. It is time to act now in favor of projecting a sustainable investment agenda with the objective of closing the existing gaps, overcoming the structural challenges of the region. From our country, we reiterate our commitment to promoting investment in sustainable development, multilateralism, and public-private partnerships to face the challenges of the coming year in Latin America. In the new Ecuador, we work tirelessly to restore peace to Ecuadorians, to give families a decent standard of living with access to a salary and job stability. It is time to work and turn our nations into territories of progress and development. Thank you.
Distinguished colleagues, friends all, a very warm welcome to this launch of the 2023 edition of the Latin American Economic Outlook. Thank you very much to our long-standing partners, the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, the CAF-Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, and the European Commission for another year of very productive cooperation. Consistent with the economic outlook for the global economy, the outlook for Latin American countries is a mild slowdown in 2024 and improved growth in 2025. 7 Latin American countries are covered in this latest OECD economic outlook that we released 2 weeks ago: Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Mexico, and Peru. On average, across those 7 countries, our economic outlook projects growth of 2.1% this year, 1.6% next year, and 2.2% in 2025. These growth rates are higher than for the OECD on average overall. but they are markedly lower than the growth rates for the global economy, or indeed growth rates that we expect to be achieved across Asia. China, India, and Indonesia in particular have growth rates that are 2 to 3 times as high. Inflation, though, has generally come down in Latin America thanks to decisive early central bank interventions, with Argentina the notable exception. Besides ensuring macroeconomic stability, the key priority is to lay the foundations for stronger growth over the medium and long term by raising productivity, boosting formal job creation, optimizing the benefits of the digital transformation and the green transition, including by boosting access to high quality education and skills development. Countries in Latin America have enormous opportunities to build strong, innovative, sustainable, and more inclusive economies. You have a young and culturally diverse population. You offer opportunities across a broad range of sectors: manufacturing, agriculture, sustainable tourism, renewable energy, services. Renewable energy already accounts for 1/3 of total energy supply in Latin America and the Caribbean. And you also have, of course, massive reserves of some of the critical minerals needed to keep advancing the green energy transition worldwide. You have 61% of all global resources of lithium, 39% of copper, and 32% of nickel minerals, and all critically important for renewable energy infrastructure, batteries, and other key digital and green technologies. But a key challenge is to increase the level of investment. Investment in Latin America and the Caribbean is only around 20% of GDP. This is half the investment levels across emerging and developing Asia, and less than in other regions of the world. An ambitious investment agenda is needed to support strong and sustainable growth across Latin America and the Caribbean. This Latin American economic outlook highlights several key lines of action. First, the policy should improve the business climate to help attract further private investment. Currently, investment in research and development sits at around 0.7% of GDP, which is well below that across the OECD at 2.7% of GDP. Improving public governance through efficient regulation and greater transparency and integrity will be important to help create a better business and investment climate. Such a policy framework would also help stimulate more research and development and innovation more effectively. Second, fiscal plans should prioritize public investment with high potential to support further long-term growth. Countries need to upgrade their infrastructure to enable more private investment and also to boost intra-regional trade. Intra-regional exports at 15% of total exports are well below the 60% in the European Union and the 50% in East and Southeast Asia. Deeper regional integration is a huge untapped opportunity to create a large and stable market across Latin American and Caribbean economies. Third, securing the necessary financing of higher investment. Innovative financing instruments such as blended finance or green social sustainability and sustainability-linked bonds can help mobilize funding for projects with high social returns. Countries across Latin America and the Caribbean should build on the success you have already achieved with these financing tools. There is more in our report to inspire policy action, including on the role of development finance institutions and how to better connect investment efforts with national development strategies. We hope you will find the Latin American Economic Outlook 2023 a useful resource to advance this new regional investment agenda. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words, and I wish you a productive event and very positive discussions focusing on these important issues. Thank you.
Bueno, muchísimas. Thank you very much to the President of the Republic of Ecuador and the Secretary General of OECD. I'd like to now recognize our partners in this adventure. Leo Nagotir, Director of the OECD, Director of also the representative of Julian Suarez, Country Representative in Chile of the Development Bank of Latin America, and Iwood Santer, Head of Cooperation of European Union Delegation in Chile. And with that, I'd like to offer the floor to our Executive Secretary, Mr. Jose Manuel Salazar Ginach. He is the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission of Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you, Marcos. Good morning, everyone. Those of you who are here face to face and those who are online, I'd like to greet ambassadors, authorities, government authorities, colleagues from UN system and ECLAC. I would like to greet you all and welcome you here, where we have the honor today of launching this 16th edition of Latin American Economic Outlook for 2023, known as LEO 2023. I'd like to start by greeting our partners in this initiative, Mr. Matthias Korman, whom we just listened to, Ragaelin Anadotir, she's the director of the OECD Development Center, Wood Sankier, head of cooperation of the European Union delegation in Chile, Julian Suarez Migliosi, country representative in Chile of the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, CAF, and Adriana Raza, whom we've been collaborating. I'd like to also thank and greet all the teams that are behind the preparation of this report. This year, LEO 23 has the slogan of investing in sustainable development. As its name indicates, the main objective is to analyze the need to develop an ambitious investment agenda and very broad in the region to be able to embark on a development and a solid and more sustainable and inclusive journey, and especially to get out of the low growth trap in which the region has been. Um, it depends on how you measure it. Certainly, for the last decade, growth has been quite low. But if you look at it as a trend growth figures, there's a very clear trend throughout many decades to decreasing growth. This report covers several areas in terms of why it is urgent to make progress on a pro-investment agenda in the region. One that is key for Latin America and the Caribbean to strengthen new development paths that will connect productive development policies with greener growth and more sustainable growth thanks to social inclusion, and also that will allow to grow at higher and sustained inclusive rates. And that has, we have said many times before, it's a package. It acts as a package. You need those four features uh, so that there will be a virtuous circle of growth. During my remarks, I will focus on some aspects of the current situation in the region, as well as some structural elements that will help us understand the rationale and the need for this agenda. And then our colleagues will discuss other areas of this report. This agenda, this pro-investment agenda, is particularly relevant for a region that keeps facing structural challenges that we have not been able to overcome. According to our estimates, and the diagnostic in this report, the region will close 2023 with the growth of only 2.2%, and we foresee a growth for 2024 of 1.9%. These figures are quite below the 3.7% of 2022. However, the low growth is not only a specific phenomenon that applies to these 2 years. I think, like we've been discussing, the tragic reality that the growth in Latin America from the 2014 to 2018 has been 0.8%. So we are completing a full decade that is even more lost than the lost decade of the 80s, where we grew 2% every year during that decade. And if we go further back in 1980, the per capita GDP growth has been lower than 1% since 1980, although it grew right after the boom of raw materials in between 2013 to 2013. And we kept it below the average rate recorded in advanced economies, which is 1 percentage point higher. A great deal of this low growth is explained by total productivity in these sectors that has become stagnant, even decreasing during the last few decades in many countries in the region. On the other hand, a recent report regarding poverty and labor market launched at ECLAC about a month ago shows that although we have been able to go back to the pre-COVID levels, we're still in the region experiencing more than 180 million people in under the line of poverty, which is that 29% that you can see there. And 70 million people in under extreme poverty, 11.2%. This has a different phase in terms of the labor market. Approximately 43% of the population in the region are living in households that rely on informal jobs, and 22% belong to mixed households, those that have formal and informal workers. Therefore, two-thirds of the population in the region rely fully or partially on informal employment, although with significant variations among countries. As to investment, Latin America and the Caribbean show a significant delay in terms of investment. The region invests approximately 20% of its GDP, which is significantly lower compared to other developing economies such as emerging countries, and in Asia, where that even reaches 39%, as you can see here on this chart. Now, in terms of direct foreign investment, there have been good news. In 2022, Latin America and the Caribbean was highlighted as a region with the largest investment, foreign direct investment in relative terms, accounting for 4% of the regional GDP. Now, it will be key for countries in the region to leverage foreign investment to boost innovation and quality jobs. And therefore, in order to increase the impact of this investment, it is key for direct foreign investment to promote more knowledge transfer, technology transfer, uh, through, for example, vendor development, production chains based on the leading companies or those companies that are leading those investment efforts. In order to also see a reduced fiscal space linked to a low level of tax collection in 2021. The tax ratio over GDP in Latin America was 21.7% compared to 34.1% in OECD, supported by a much more regressive tax structure compared to developed countries. Uh, this is added to the significant debt level, especially in the Caribbean countries. In order to address the growth challenge, and in particular of a stagnant productivity in the region, we've been insisting on the fact that it is key for our countries to scale and to substantially streamline the efforts they've been doing in terms of productive development policies, understood as such instruments and programs, and more generally efforts that are directly focused on diversifying and sophisticating and fostering a positive structural change of the economies as a vehicle in order to increase their productivity and their economic dynamism. Productive development agendas should be based on efforts in different dimensions. Among others, we will have to work in strengthening science, technology, and innovation agendas because whereas the reason is investing only 0.65% of its GDP on research and development, OECD countries, for example, are investing on average more than 2.7%. We will also have to delve deeper in terms of technology outreach in order to adopt technologies and knowledge on the part of companies and producers, especially SMEs. We'll have to work on identifying and or shortening human talent gaps in each required in each industry. We'll have to consolidate ecosystems for entrepreneurship and startups. We'll have to address regulatory and quality issues associated to those sectors that boost growth. In this way, we'll be able to change the very low trend in productivity, whereas back in the 80s, our labor productivity accounted for 47% of productivity of the United States. In 2022, it was only 26%. One key element in the context of productive development policies that countries and territories should scale up is to do strategic wages and productive wages. From ECLAC, we've been proposing 14 dynamic sectors that have a potential to trigger this potential in the region. In this LEO, in this report that we launched today, we have grouped these sectors into four major clusters that are the ones that you see there, that are broken down into the different green transition, digital transformation, the economy of care and healthcare, and farming, sustainable systems, and food production systems. Now, developing the potential of these sectors will not happen overnight or spontaneously. Of course, we will have to invest promoting the development of such industries. This will also involve public and private investment and also the contribution of direct foreign investment.
However, for these investments to have the expected returns, it's necessary to organize cooperation among the key actors in each one of these sectors. It will be relevant to align efforts in terms of investment with the sectoral priorities determined by countries and territories based on their productive development policies. And perhaps one clarification here. These sectors are an illustration. It's not that these are only and exclusively these sectors. Each country in each context will have to see which are their sectoral priorities. But it is a list suggested, and many of these sectors are areas where, in fact, we see that practically all countries of the region are working, such as energy transition, circular economy, electromobility, exporting, modern services, and so on and so on. And so, to link these multiple efforts based on these policies, it will be essential to determine governance arrangements to align key actors with resources in relation to the development agendas, which are the same actors. They determine them and they tweak them over time. One way of organizing this work is through cluster initiatives, very powerful way of connecting the efforts made by the different actors, public, private, academic, civil society, local governments, to draft and put into practice these strategies to improve the productivity of enterprises, associated value chains, to the productive wages by sector and by territory. We have just launched this week a platform that identifies the cluster initiatives and territorial connections throughout the region and that will allow us to strengthen the agendas and even work on projects that aim towards the productive integration of the region. And within this same spirit of connected work, it will be essential to strengthen joint work to have a greater integration and cooperation in the region. And the region shows levels of trade intra-group of barely 15% of all trade, are far below, for example, what we see in the EU, and where intra-group trade is approximately 60% of overall trade. And so we need a greater trade connection among the countries of the region to move towards a greater diversification, economic complexity, because the export basket among the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean is more diversified and based more on manufacturing of middle technology, and sometimes higher than what we have with other regions of the world. And so, once again, this will require our productive development policies that work specifically in order to internationalize and consolidate the exporting offer. And to conclude my part of the summary of the report, we must be clear regarding the fact that the conjunction and global demands linked to regional needs lead also to important challenges and threats, especially for a region that still has a limited capacity for investment and financing. And that is part of the themes that Raga and Julian will be talking to us about. And also the theme uh, local and global challenges require of partnerships, associations, and a spirit for cooperation, working together based on shared values, complementarities, and Wood will be speaking about this. Increasing efforts towards investment linked to productive development, consolidating the exchange of experiences, strengthening learning among peers, and making the boast of multilateral cooperation and South-South cooperation is essential in a world where no one can save themselves without collaborating, because now what is questioned is interdependence. But the fact is that we will continue with an interdependent world. And this is a world where we must collaborate to have the best results at global, national, and local levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jose Manuel, and dear Excellencies, partners, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I very much apologize for not speaking in Spanish. I could say buenos días a todos y todas, but that's it. So I'm very grateful for the interpreters, which looks like I'm the only one using, at least when Spanish is speaking, so I'm very grateful. It's such a pleasure to be here in Santiago to share the key messages from the Leo 2023 alongside our good partners from UN-ECLAC, from CAF, the European Commission, and to have the opportunity to have this discussion that we're going to have here afterwards. As the executive director said, creating quality jobs should be at the center of LAC's investment agenda. One of the region's main challenges is the persistence of high levels of labor informality. This results in lower wages and prevents people from achieving better living conditions. 2/3, as was said here before, 65% of the region's population live in households that depend totally or partially on informal employment, though with very important variations within the region between the Latin American countries. More and better investment in physical and human capital are key to creating new formal jobs. In this Leo, we focus on the ability of foreign direct investment to boost development and contribute to skills development in the region. When we look at the impact of FDI on regional jobs in the last 2 decades, we see that manufacturing stands out as a key job creator. 65% of all formal jobs created through FDI were in manufacturing, which received 47% of the foreign direct investment. Promoting quality jobs should be at the core of all policies to attract foreign investment. LAC also has the potential to attract large investments in renewable energy. FDI in renewables creates 60% more jobs than FDI in fossil fuels, showing the green transition's considerable potential for job creation in the region. Since 2011, FDI in renewable energy has surpassed FDI in fossil fuels almost steadily, highlighting FDI's growing contribution to the energy transition. Nonetheless, some challenges remain. FDI in renewable energy has not yet recovered from the COVID-19 crisis, and cross-border investments in renewables still need to increase across the LAC economies. Further investments in green transition can create better jobs and boost economic activity. Additional investment of 3 percentage points in sustainable food manufacturing by 2030 can contribute to almost 19% increase in employment in the sector, or 18.8 to be exact. Similarly, additional investment of 3 percentage points should contribute to a 14% increase in employment in sectors such as public administration, sustainable construction, sustainable commerce, closely linked to the circular economy, and sustainable transport. In all of these sectors, we need to scale up the successes that we've already seen at the local level and promote knowledge sharing across the LAC countries. At the same time, we must ensure that job creation does not increase social and gender disparities in the LAC countries. For green investment to have a positive impact on social inclusion, labor market policies, and social assistance programs, for green investments to have a positive impact on social inclusion, labor market policies and social assistance programs are needed that provide skills and opportunities to the most vulnerable people, including women. Promoting citizens' participation and engagement around investments in LAC will also be key. This is especially relevant in LAC as levels of trust in the private sector remains low. More than half of Latin Americans have low or no trust in firms. Confidence in the positive effects of FDI also decreased by 17 percentage points in 4 years. Citizens' involvement across the investment cycle can help build support and avoid social conflict, leading to investment projects that are more effective, sustainable, and equitable. Some ways to improve citizen engagement in the investment agenda include public consultations, participatory budgeting, or representative deliberative processes, environmental and social impact assessments, which can encourage dialogue among different stakeholders, including local communities, businesses, governments, and NGOs. More equal distribution of the benefits of investment projects, allocating part of them to education and skills development, and to local communities. National development plans can help put investment policies front and center. Our analysis of 14 national development plans in LAC reveals the relative importance each country gives to different strategic areas. We, for example, observe that digital transformation appears prominently in most LAC national development plans, with Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, and Peru giving this greater relevance. The pharmaceutical and healthcare industry receives significant attention in most countries, particularly in Chile, Guatemala, Honduras, and Panama. The energy transition is also addressed in most development plans, receiving particular emphasis in Argentina and Brazil. Countries can take further advantage of national development plans to define and implement participatory strategies to promote private and public investments. Now allow me to give the floor to my colleague Julian Suarez Migliozzi. I hope I pronounced
okay.
Well, my name is Ragnhildur Elín Árnadóttir, so that's you can practice that. But Julian is CAF's country representative in Chile, and he will discuss how to finance the investments needed in the region. Julian, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I will not move forward just by saying your name. I will just say, thank you, Raga. And I'll keep on in Spanish. Es un gusto para CAF, el Banco de Desarrollo de América Latina.
It is a pleasure for CAF to be here in the launching of the Leo Economic Outlook for Latin America and the Caribbean 2023, and greetings to our colleagues, our partners, and with whom the OECD, ECLAC, and EU study is done. And getting into the presentation of these slides that I will share with you and some inputs, some outcomes regarding Leo 2023, what we would like to say is that we're clear regarding the gaps in the investment. And what I would like to highlight, understanding how there are opportunities to move ahead in terms of closing the gaps in terms of financing. So adding to that approach, with regard to an agenda that contributes to closing financing gaps, one of the initiatives that the report highlights is the role of financial development institutions as the drivers of private and public investment. Now, this sort of institution, as the report recommends, may contribute to better coordinate joint work, for example, hand in hand with the other financial institutions in countries, but also there is room for concrete work with the multilateral banking system. And this is something that CAF has been working on in the region with financial institutions for development at national levels, at regional level, regional development banks, with whom we have reached agreements whereby we give priority to relationships with this sort of institution, and we grade them with our relations with financial institutions. We see them as strategic partners, and this means that Northeast Brazilian financing banks, Minas Gerais or the Banco Estado that we work with here in Chile, because it is a bank with a public capital, see them as strategic partners, and they have access to preferential windows in terms of financial conditions with whom CAF works with these institutions, and also for technical assistance resources. Regionally, it is essential the role of these financial development institutions in order to address financing gaps wherever the commercial banks does not reach so deeply, and particularly in the financing of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. But also, this sort of institution may contribute to better focus on banking priorities in terms of essential development aspects, climate and energy financing, and the opportunities for the region, which is seen as a solution to the region with regard to the climate crisis at global level, but also providing solutions that allow financing via the economy, energy transition, or linked more directly to an innovation agenda.
LEO 2023 discusses financial instruments used by 38 banks in 13 national, subnational development banks of 13 countries in the region, and provides evidence about how relevant these institutions are to contribute to development agendas, especially in terms of closing the financing gap, to be able to make progress on an effective public and private investment agenda. And specifically, the difference is seen in the vocation of these types of institutions, development banking system, to foster a larger use of the bank system and by small and medium enterprises in terms of larger access to a broader spectrum of financial instruments that are structured or tailored to the needs of these types of enterprises. Second, also a better predisposition to contribute with investment in strategic industries, where also micro, medium, and small enterprises that are part of value chains or clusters, as the executive secretary said, may somehow have access to this type of foreign investment, direct investment, and to support a growth or expansion or business expansion initiatives. Third, a better predisposition in terms of funding foreign trade, which can be covered by using different types of products, but the most common ones are guarantees or pre and post export funding. Fourth, there's an explicit commitment of these financial institutions that is more effective than the other banking system to contribute to essential sustainable development goals, green initiatives, digital economy, or, for example, a gender-sensitive agenda. And fifth, I would say also that this type of financial institutions are showing closeness to financing micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises in terms of their cash flows or liquidity conditions, financing the day-to-day expenses, either inventory, working capital, or payroll. If we go to the next slide, please. We just heard from the executive secretary and also the OECD representative about the fiscal restrictions that exist and the limited space for financing for public and private financing. Well, one relatively new instrument in the region we consider 2014-2022 are these theme bonds or social or green and sustainable bonds that are associated to the sustainability agenda. You can see here in black how these types of bonds have grown in relative share of the market in the context of the issuance of bonds in the region. By 2022, 32% of total public bond issuance in Latin America and the Caribbean was explained by these theme-based bonds, and especially possibly there's working space here from now on. There are several interesting initiatives I would highlight. For example, the bond linked to NDC's goals from Uruguay with the support of multilateral organizations and UNDP. Also, the very successful agenda the sustainable finance team of the Ministry of Finance with the debt team in the Ministry of Finance that have been driving since 2019, and also other types of products that are other financial products that may um, uh, develop equivalent financial conditions equivalent to these types of initiatives that also foster the achievement or the performance of those goals associated to sustainability that some financial institutions are launching, such as CAF with some of these products. If we go to the next slide, please. In order to delve deeper into these theme-based bonds, the region has taken significant steps, but that have been isolated efforts in defining, for example, of its green taxonomies or taxonomies associated to the 2030 sustainability agenda. We've seen, for example, the definition of a green national taxonomy in Colombia. Chile is working on developing a green national taxonomy that we've been supporting from CAF. But of course, there's some room to harmonize or standardize all these efforts. That is to say, to make those efforts universal in the region and to connect them with regulation and supervision that is consistent in the region. Of course, this will contribute also to the appetite and therefore the success of these types of issuances in terms of actually capturing a broader international investor base, institutional investors, for example, philanthropists that may be interested on this type of agenda. So there's some room by looking at the sustainable financing frameworks nationally, regionally, and internationally to better coordinate among different stakeholders and to harmonize the mechanisms at different government levels, and also improving, for example, the design and monitoring of KPIs and indicators, as well as the sustainability performance indicators that may, of course, and undoubtedly impact the achievement of these. I will close with this, and I'd like to offer the floor to Edward Sanker, Head of Cooperation of the European Union in Chile. Thank you.
Hola, sí. Secretario.
Executive Secretary, dear friends from CAF, OECD, ECLAC, and ambassadors, representatives of the public and private sector. Good morning. It is a pleasure to be here representing the European Union delegation. It is a pleasure to keep on supporting the publication of this report, the Latin American Economic Outlook. The LEO 2023 contributes to focus on investment and necessary reforms that are needed to transform the productive model for us. LEO is a fundamental tool to strengthen dialogue and cooperation among all involved stakeholders. This is confirmed by the vast representation of financial institutions, governments, private sector, civil society, and international organizations at this event. The European Union and CELAC summit in July 2023 confirmed the commitment of renewing our partnership that is based on values and shared interests and strong economic, social, and cultural bonds. This summit was key to shape this commitment and to capitalize this renewed effort. In the joint declaration of that summit, leaders expressed the commitment of reinforcing business and investment relationship among the two regions and recognizing the potential of the global gateway investment agenda between the European Union and Latin America and the Caribbean. The idea is to foster sustainable connections that may work for individuals and for the planet. We try to promote a sustainable development of both on the economic, social, and environment context. The mobilized investment through Global Gateway should address global challenges from the fight against climate change up to the improvement of healthcare systems, improving competitiveness, and global supply chain improvement. Global Gateway has the highest environmental and social standards for transparency. Projects go beyond than just transnational investment. They intend to create local value to foster formal job creation, to promote innovation through technology transfer, working in an entrepreneurial and regulatory environment that will contribute to human development. We are convinced that quality investments and with an impact are key for a sustainable and fair productive transformation and to face common challenges between Latin America, the Caribbean, and the European Union. For us, there are two key words: sustainability and partnerships. Latin America and the Caribbean is a key regional for the Global Gateway Initiative in the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. The European Union is the first investor. The investment agenda intends to strengthen this collaboration. The agenda contains a selection of more than 130 projects that are expected to mobilize 45 billion euros for Latin America and the Caribbean, and that account for 18% additional over the investment flows of the European Union in these countries. Also, the investment agenda of Global Gateway has an innovative focus because it will be implemented as a Europe team, which is a partnership between the European Union and its member states, financial development institutions, including the European Investment Bank, credit agencies, export agencies, and the private sector, working together in private-public partnerships with the governments in Latin America and the Caribbean. This will connect this initiative with the countries. Let's take an example of Chile. This is the country that I know the best. Only 2 days ago, the Advanced European Union Chile Advanced Framework Agreement was signed, turning Chile as the first country to sign a new generation framework with this historical agreement. The European Union and Chile take their partnership to the next level to reinforce their political dialogue, to strengthen cooperation, to foster a commercial and investment opportunity based on shared values that are key, including important commitments and specific provisions regarding human rights, sustainable trade, and gender equality. Also, Chile has several priority projects in Global Gateway that I believe are a good illustration of how we can create investment on sustainability. The first example is that in July we signed an MOU with Chile for value chains in terms of critical raw materials. And now, one example in terms of what we're going to do to support Chile in its national lithium strategy is that we are going to
Bien.
okay. What we're going to do is to use European technology that is connected to another priority project of Copernicus in Global Gateway for Earth observation. Next March, we launched the Regional Center for Earth Observation, Copernicus, and University of Chile. And with that, we are going to provide Earth monitoring and sea monitoring services. And specifically here in Chile, we are going to create an app to monitor the impact of lithium extraction on aquifers by using Earth observation techniques. And this is a very concrete contribution to sustainability of the lithium strategy in Chile. Another example is the urban initiative that we have developed together with the member states of the European Union in order to develop the green hydrogen strategy. I'm pleased that we've heard in presentation from OECD about the importance of this social impact and environmental impact studies, among other topics, because this is exactly what we are doing with our technical cooperation program financed by the European Union and Germany. We're going to use the same Earth observation technology to identify the most vulnerable ecosystems to prevent setting wind farms in these areas, for example. We've also developed a methodology to measure the social impact of investment projects. And what the Commission chair announced in June, we're going to build a financing platform for renewable hydrogen. That is a collaboration of the European Investment Plan, the German bank. Together, they're going to put up 200 million euros in credits, and the European Union will contribute with 15 billion in subsidies. That's blended finance, which is what the representative of OECD presented at the beginning of the session. And with that, we're going to directly finance hydrogen production projects, and we hope we'll be able to leverage between 2 and 5 billion euros. Also, with the engagement of Europe, there's also that also includes sustainability, because banks have very demanding criteria in terms of environmental impact, social impact, etc. So this is not just empty words or numbers. This is real investments and real efforts. Just in closing, the LEO offers an important guide in a necessary process to promote sustainable and investments in necessary reforms to transform the productive model. In line with these results presented today, the European Union will continue to boost a sound alliance with Latin America and the Caribbean, hand in hand with the institutions such as ECLAC, CAF, and the OECD Development Center. Thank you very much.
And now we will move on to the second session of the agenda, the panel discussion. I would like to recognize our moderator, Adriana Arriaza, Director of Macroeconomic Studies at CAF, to moderate the panel and introduce the speakers. Good morning, and thank you all very much. It is for me a pleasure to once again be attending the launching of the LEO report that we have been collaborating with for several years. My greetings to Jose Manuel, Julian, and our partners in this publication. I am to moderate a very nice panel. Have the difficult task of keeping everyone to the assigned time, and so I beg of you to please keep to the 5 minutes that you have been assigned. I am first of all pleased to introduce Jorge Ivan Gonzalez, who is Minister Director of the National Planning Department of Colombia. And also João Rossi, Director for International Organizations of the Development Ministry of Planning and Budget, Brazil. Carla Flores, Director of Invest Chile. Fernando Carrillo, who is the first Vice Chairman of the Board of Directors of PRISA. Roberto Muñoz Laporte, CEO of Telefónica in Chile. Javier Díaz Fajardo, Co-Chair of the International Development Finance Club, IDFC. Andrea Costafreda, a Programmatic Director for Latin America and the Caribbean of Oxfam, and Maria Teresa Ruiz Tagle, who is Executive Director of CLG Chile Corporate Leaders Group for Climate Action. And so we're going to begin our discussion asking Jorge Ivan Gonzalez a question. How has the government of Colombia been able to link the agenda with the investments, with the very extensive plan for development until 2026? Good morning, and thank you very much for the invitation. As has been said, we in our National Development Plan, approved by the Congress 1 year ago and valid and for the 4 years of the government term, we're waging in that these policies will continue with the next government because these are structural wages. First of all, we included what we call the ordering of the territory around the area. And so this has certain implications in terms of economic policy, quite major for the country. I feel that there is chaos in territorial zoning. or order. And that has implications from every viewpoint, especially in terms of forestation and the development plan. Well, we have a target to reduce deforestation from 170,000 hectares to 140,000 hectares. Targets that make you sad, because in any case, we're going to have a very high volume of deforestation. And so finances here, this is crucial. We have a fiscal situation, as in the rest of Latin America, some countries more than others, that is very difficult. The public debt balance from 2011 and this year went from 31% of GDP to 60% of GDP. And the data that you're showing now of the scarce impact of taxation in the country, well, we are making an effort to improve the territorial finances. And of course, the territory, its main instrument, is the updating of the various property valuations that in addition to determining different uses that are possible, also determines the technological use or which might allow increasing fiscal revenues. And so we're hoping that all of this can be done with our own resources. The municipalities that have updated their cadasters have doubled their financial resources. We are thinking of a national tax reform, but at the moment it's impossible. We did one already when the government came into town, so we would like to really further this. And it is, here we have the taxonomy of what it means to move ahead in the valuation of our environmental assets in the country. And that we're still slow in that. All the mechanisms that were mentioned now, we're only just beginning to really think about how we could structure all this to have more audacious, regressive policies. So we must work closely with international agencies to find alternatives. The issue of sustainability, of course, it has been said, all international reports must be accompanied by a far more equitable policy. But we continue to have a very high concentration of income, and we continue with all of the problems that were already mentioned in the report. The part of the population in Latin America live in poverty. And I would like to end mentioning something that is not included in the report, at least significantly. But I would like to see underscored more, and that is central banks. How to get central banks to focus on these matters of green financing, interest rates. This is mentioned 2-3 times in the report, and the difficulties that this is going to imply for economic growth. In Colombia, you saw the graph, it's in the report. The relationship between the inflation target and the real target is very large, and the bank insists on a restrictive interest rate policy. And this has implications of all types. We've begun discussing this in the country, what we could call a green fiscal rule, to give oxygen to the possibility of having green financing, and that this not have such harsh implications on the fiscal rule, because for us this has become very difficult. So thank you very much, Director. And those are some of the points that we could move ahead together and see how we can change international finances in favor of growth. We also have industrialization that we are also discussing. Thank you very much for your words, Minister, and very relevant, especially your mention of the plans to improve decentralization and the participation of local governments that each time have a more weight in terms of investment, and this is going to affect the financial architecture in order to reach these entities. And now we will continue with Joao Rossi, Director for International Organizations. And the question is, how is the G20 agenda under the chair of Brazil right now, how is this linked to the priorities of the region of Latin America and the Caribbean, and what will be the impact of this investment? Thank you, Adriana. And good morning, everyone. I will ask for your authorization to speak in Portuguese. I hope you understand. Unfortunately, Portuguese is not a recognized language at this event. We will do our best. And now Brazil is at the chair of the G20. Well, you know, our president has announced the three major priorities for Brazil within the G20. The first is social inclusion and the fight against hunger and poverty. The second is sustainable development and the energy transition. And the third is the reform of international governance institutions. I believe that the first priority is very much in line with the priorities of Latin America and the Caribbean. And this too was clearly expressed in the Leo. Latin America is one of, if not the region, with the highest social inequality levels of the world. And these levels, as well as the level of poverty, as Leo has shown, is still very much above the levels that we had before the pandemic. So this is a challenge which is very significant. And our president has highlighted this as chair of the G20. The other issue is sustainable development. This is an emergency, not only for Latin America, but also a global emergency. We here in Latin America and the Caribbean are suffering a lot with the drought, natural disasters. Each day is stronger in Brazil and Argentina. We've had a major droughts last year and this year. And this had a major impact on the economy. But the region is not only part of the problem, but also part of the solution. Latin America has the lowest levels of emissions. Our energy matrices are highly renewable by now. And I see efforts being made in Chile, for example, which are very successful to make the energy matrix each time more renewable. And also in Brazil, we believe that this is something that we need to bring to the G20. And then I know my time is almost up, but I would just like to add what we are thinking regarding the financial track. There, yes, we see that multilateral banks could play a very important role precisely to bring in the private initiatives together with the governments and also technical assistance and knowledge, which is so relevant to governments, so as to have more resources to not only the green transition, but in investments in infrastructure that's resilient, good quality, and inclusive, and accessible to the people. I will stop here because I think that my time is up. Thank you. Thank you very much, Director. Undoubtedly, you've highlighted the relevance of aligning these investments to reduce inequality in Latin America, and that this is a chronic issue, and it is repeated over time, as was just highlighted by CAF, and the relevance of considering this for the green investments and the sustainability of development. The relevance of thinking how the energy matrix in Latin America is made up, and of course, the relevance of resilient infrastructure. And of course, how could multilateral banks support these investments? Now, let's move on to Carla Flores, who is director of Invest Chile. And the question for her is, how has Invest Chile contributed as its role in attracting FDI and achieving the country aim of moving towards a new model of sustainable development? Carla.
A todos y todas.
Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to highlight the importance of foreign direct investment in Chile. I believe this makes it easier to understand the role that Invest has. Direct foreign investment accounts for approximately 8% of our GDP, which is way above the average in the region. And when we see fixed capital gross formation, 40% of this gross capital formation comes from international enterprises. 54% of this capital are greenfield projects. So for direct investment is actually leading growth in investment in this country. We can see that it accounts for 30% of formal jobs, full-time jobs. They are a major contribution to formal employment. And when we look at salary and administrative information, salaries are at least 39% higher compared to the national average. We are conducting a study with IDB where we have seen that it is statistically significant to see a higher demand for intermediate goods. Also, the connection with local small and medium enterprises are important. So this account for 66% of total exports of the country in terms of goods and 85% of service exports. Something quite relevant where we see that one of OECD recommendations for Chile has always been to focus on services. Also understanding the impact on financing, we have experienced a reduction in the depth of our capital markets during the pandemic because of the pension fund withdrawals, and the reduction of foreign investments in Chile have been quite significant, more than $10 billion every year of fresh resources to the economy with direct contributions to the economy. It's quite important. And if we also think of $7 billion of profits that remain in the country that are not sent outside, it is also quite relevant in order to for companies to have actually better financing conditions. Having said that, and considering the importance of foreign direct investment, the vision of promotion of foreign investment has been state policy that dates back to 2016 as part of the innovation and growth agenda. And as part of the OECD recommendation in that agenda, Invest Chile plays a role as an articulator mostly. Of course, we support international promotion of strategic sectors that are defined by the Presidency of the Republic and a ministerial committee. But not only this is about international promotion, but we also play the role of articulating the efforts of regional governments or subnational governments by adopting a bottom-up approach. We have strategic industries nationally where we do the work of promoting foreign investment, but we also focus bottom-up from the regions in the country because they have their own development strategies for production, and what we try to do is to become their operative branch, if you wish, but not only in terms of international promotion, but because we are legally mandated to work on enabling conditions for them and also investment climate policy advocacy. So we also work on identifying infrastructure gaps, for example, human capital gaps, among others, and also regulatory issues where more standardization is needed, especially when we see some industries that are under development, such as green hydrogen, critical minerals, etc. Sometimes it's necessary to work on regulatory matters. So we have the legal obligation in our daily work with international companies, plus in our relationship with some national governments, of presenting all these types of topics to the ministerial committee in order to progress in that agenda that improves the appeal of Chile as a receptor of for investment, allowing for this impact to reach out to all citizens in this country. Because part of the invest Chile role or mandate is to build the conditions and to raise initiatives that will improve the impact of foreign investment on the local economy, and that's why we work with some national governments, but also with the small and medium-sized enterprises or local vendors in order to connect them with foreign investors to improve that linkage. And those chains also working with international companies by identifying human capital needs. I know I have 1 minute. And of course, we work with those entities that will help us develop those skills in the country. So our work is not only about promoting internationally, but to create enabling conditions and also to improve the impact on the local economy.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Carla. I believe it is very clear how important direct investment is in Chile. We're talking about 8 percentage points of the GDP, way above the national average, and 40% of the investments. And also something important, 39% salary, 39% above salaries in Chile. So this has a larger degree of productivity if we compare both. And also the importance of Invest Chile in terms of its articulating role of certain critical industries, development plans, and the connection of those industries with foreign companies, and closing gaps in order to focus these investments and to raise the impact of those. Let's go to Fernando Carrillo, first Vice Chairman of the Board of Directors of PRISA. Regarding the design of a national investment agenda together with the citizens in each country, what elements could be useful to foster these participatory processes and that will also strengthen the social context in each one of the countries? Thank you, Andrea. I'd like to thank all the organizers. I'd like to first highlight how important it is to mention this, because we usually talk about what, but we don't talk about how. And I believe we need to be bold enough to talk about the methodology and the policy behind all of this, and the role of democracy, the role of citizens' engagement and deliberation is key. And I believe that's novel for an institution like ASA. Back in 2002, with Andres Alamand and we published a book that is called Policy is Important for Development. I believe there are basically 5 concepts that express what we're talking about. We're talking about state legitimacy, we're talking about credibility, how to fight significant disenchantment or disappointment with institutions. We're talking about a new social contract, an objective in which there's an alignment with development objectives, with the ability of considering social issues, also recovering trust, transparency, the fight against corruption, and of course, the uh, silver bullet, which is social dialogue. Mr. Gonzalez said that this is about overcoming political cycles, of keeping an effort of this nature sustainable, which is what Colombia has done in its discussion of the National Development Plan. Since we're here at ECLAC Cathedral, it is more important than ever. And of course, that connection between economic growth and social goals of digital, green, and sustainable is key and quite a novelty, I would say. So, talking about the need to recover these spaces for democracy is key. democracy is the largest premise, is the pivotal point in order to achieve these consensus nationally. And unfortunately, the other side of the coin is the polarization, lack of agreement, sectorism, and lack of social dialogue in the Latin American context, the lack of trust on the state, incapable governments, and weak states of irrelevant legislative powers. And all of that are not in connection with social contract. And I believe as that concept, we're trying to establish a new social contract. In our case, for example, in Colombia, 1991 constitution that has casted so much light in that regard, and that started the field of participatory democracy that is connected to citizens' deliberation, thanks to a study from OECD that I always like to highlight, which is the 8 pathways to deepen deliberative the democracy, which is the connection between that and the new methodologies with democratic innovations, democratic assemblies, citizens organizations, deliberation services, which are very new for democracy that consolidate these objectives. So, talking about the search for consensus and social dialogue of national agreements, as most of the countries are trying to achieve, should be the starting point for these efforts. And I believe there's a major conclusion to be drawn, which has to do with the politics, being able to recover the dignity that politics has lost as a convergence point, and also to make it in the sense of avoiding. It is key that poor politics and poor politicians, of course, they generate very poor public policies, and it is important to um, uh, venture into these new fields because they were somehow ignored in the past in the theory of development, and they are now are part of this key chapter in which we hear the need for a strong public institutional arrangement. And I close by telling you that rehabilitation of politics needs to take place by addressing the major discussions that have been impacting citizens, which have to do with the efficacy of democracy to fight inequality, poverty. Inequality is still a more ethical than economic challenge and more political than technical, and therefore coming up with significant investment public programs addresses that. And well, ultimately, in our continent of Latin America, if we are able to do this policy without with clean hands, basically. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias a Fernando Carrillo por destacar. Thank you, Fernando Carrillo, for highlighting the relevance of institutionality and policy to formulate social contracts that aim to improve or tending to improve the well-being of the population, and how, in that context, to fit in investments that may lead to reestablishing trust in states, institutions, and reform this vicious circle to attract investment and improve the well-being of countries. And so now let's continue with Roberto Muñoz Laporte, who is the CEO of Telefónica Chile. And of course, the question has to do with digitalization, of course, which is at the heart of productive transformation today. And the question, what do you think should be done in order to foster the development in telecommunications and the expansion of internet in the region of Latin America and the Caribbean? Well, good morning, everyone. Before answering your question, I would like to praise that we can meet here to speak about investments. I think it is important that in our region, the biggest trigger of social development will have to do with investment. And as a rule, and allow me get into this. As a rule, we think that in finance, that investment is a bank transaction. No, it's not a bank transaction. In our case, in our sector, in the last 15 years, we've invested $25 billion, a figure for the size of a country that is quite significant. 1/3, in fact, of that done by Telefonica. And when you think of that money, first of all, a small part is the purchase of imported goods coming into the customs office, and you need to download a container, hire people to do that. You need to pay the taxes to for them to be allowed into the country, and then you need to get the transport to move it around the country, and then you need to deploy it in different cities. That is people hired to do that. And then afterwards, you need to sell the products, and the products mean opening up offices. And putting offices means building, and once again, hiring people, and that they may have this and then operate this. And very important, and Carlos, you said this, all of that means formal work. That means quality jobs. Well, that means development. As a rule, I like to kick off with this because words somehow are not always able to convey the real impact of investment. Investment is development. Latin America needs development, needs investment, and Chile is no exception. Of course, what Carla said is true. In our case, telecommunications, Chile has twice the ratio per capita in comparison to the second in the region. Chile invests about $100 per capita in telecommunications, and the second reason is less than half that. And so, of course, we have the most modern telecommunication networks in Latin America, world-class standards in fiber optics, among the highest quality in the world. But we still have some way to go. We need to move this further because everyone is digital, and the future economic setting is based on the digital infrastructure, new technology, and we're only just starting out with this. We're only just starting out. As you can imagine, 2 or 3 years back, you can imagine our digital situation. And this has changed, and this will continue. We will have to continue developing digital infrastructure. Just one data. In the last 3 years, in the case of Chile, internet consumption has multiplied by 3.5 times. And this is the same as the physical highways. They need to be updated. They need to be developed further so that all this traffic can fit in the road. Having said that, I would like to say that, yes, I think this forum is very relevant, and I congratulate everyone because this is what we need to do in Latin America, how to develop countries. And this has to do with quality investment. It has to do with quality investors that bring in not only money, but also good practices. And the other thing I would like to say is that what do we see as one of the main international investors in Chile? Who are the main facilitators of this investment? And I would like to say 3 things that I believe are important. The first, when you decide as an investor where to place your capital, there must be a project, an initiative that is powerful, an initiative that is attractive to the investor and that is aligned with what the citizens want. Because projects that only seek a private benefit in today's world are not viable in the long term. They must go hand in hand. The second thing has to do with the capacity in different places to be able to carry out these projects. And there are 2 sides to this. On the one hand, human capital. You need to have trained people to carry these activities out. And I think that in general in the region, we do have it. We have a lot of human capital that is being developed. We must care for our human capital and continue to develop it. But we need to ensure that the pathway to implement all this is also cleared. It's not often easy to do because of what they call the permisología in Latin America, which is all has to do with all the permits and authorizations required, all the red tape. Can you imagine what it means to put a cable from one corner to another? In developed countries can take days, but in a country such as ours, it could take months because we need 20 or 30 people to sign an authorization to be able to lay a cable. Yes, I will end it here, don't worry. But and lastly, I would like to say that it is very important that whoever gets involved with policy has to do with investment and stability. Investment takes decades to be recovered, but the strategy is core. And so this depends a lot on the policies that each country has. And I think that organizations such as yours play a highly relevant role. That is it. I thank you. Adriana, I hope I have kept to my time. Well, thank you very much, Roberto. Yes, this is being the timekeeper is not always a nice job, but it is essential. I believe that your intervention has been essential. It must be understood that for the region to make full use of this digital transformation, this cannot happen if there is no investment in connectivity and infrastructure. And for this to be possible, it is also important that in the countries we should have stability and a greater training of human capital in order to materialize these investments and for these to have an impact on sustainable growth. And now let's move on to the next speaker, finance, on financing with Javier Diaz-Fajardo, who is the co-chair of the International Development Finance Club, the IDFC. Following the summit of common finances held in Cartagena this year, what lessons learned are crucial to implement in international financial compacts and that must be taken into account for financial development infrastructures may improve the situation of SMEs in the region? Thank you, Adriana. Special greetings to the ECLAC authorities and all colleagues. It is a pleasure to be here among colleagues and friends. Sebastian, Fernando, and so many more well-known faces. Well, Diana, we were recently together in Colombia. I would like to use my time in two fronts. On the one hand, I would like to share the learnings of shared financing, because there are many reasons to be optimistic, and then refer to the challenges that also came up in the summit and that we experienced very deeply in Colombia. We were the host and bank colleagues, and I would like to share the main lessons. The first, perhaps the most important, is that the combination, the power of public development banks is immense. We're speaking of $20 trillion that are there to be mobilized and that are being mobilized for development in the region. That is a very impressive figure. And you realize this when you get together and we realize that we're talking about the KFWs of the world, multilateral agreements, multilateral banks and institutions. And so there is a tremendous strength there. What else did we learn and that made us feel optimistic? At least in the year 2022, there was a very important milestone, and that was that, globally speaking, $1 trillion was invested in the energy transition, sustainable energy transition. That figure that is historical in itself, for the first time, is equivalent to the same number of investment in fossil fuels. And so there are reasons and motivations that lead us to think that, yes, multilateral banking and public banking and private banking is moving in the right direction. As was mentioned here, the tremendous amount of bonus and innovative financial instruments backing sustainability. The green bond market is more than $500 billion a year. So these figures are quite impressive, and this demands investments for $500 billion in green bonds. And you could add blue bonds and then social bonds, sustainable bonds, and so on. And so, yes, there is innovation, there is strength, there is cooperation, and all that is part of the learning, and very important. We focused on the Amazon. I think that as a Latin American region, we've taken too long to realize that Amazon is essential for all purposes. It is the lung of the planet, and we have a green coalition led by BNDES, by IDB, and CAF, and the World Bank has also joined in. And so we have focused on the Amazon. And this is a reason to be optimistic. They're the same that say that the same reasons mean that there are tremendous challenges ahead. The UN Secretary General said, what are the pillars that we have here for 2030 and that are not being met? And one is that we need a massive mobilization of financing, either $20 trillion available and mobilization of 2 or 3 trillion a year. That is not sufficient. We need to mobilize more. And what we also learned is that, yes, we are together but we're not collaborating sufficiently. And the main challenge here is that the cost of capital continues to be excessively high for someone who cannot pay. Said in other words, if a public development bank in a developed country accesses to capital 4%, probably they not need it that much, but a public bank in a developing country accesses the same capital at 14%. So, in conclusion and challenge, we must join efforts so that the cost of capital should come down for those who need it most. Because if the cost of capital is goes down, and then we can hand this benefit down to the SMEs. That is one of the main challenges, to reduce the cost of capital. Another challenge: sometimes you don't need a loan. Sometimes it is far more positive to have a guarantee. And in this, I would like to praise the CAF initiative. So, to mobilize resources without having to imply a loan. And so, I thank you for leveraging this, but we need it just a little bit faster if you could help us with that. We also see very interesting initiatives in terms of exchange of debt for climate. I would like to highlight what was done in Ecuador and Barbados recently, where the financial innovation has already been put at, and he apologizes, and where it has been placed at the service of countries for conservation in very specific initiatives. And so, to round up, because my clock has just reminded me, there are many reasons to celebrate. Public Development Bank, very powerful, but returns are insufficient. And we need to determine with the main challenge we're seeing in Colombia, which are macroeconomic conditions that are very adverse. We continue with an inflation that is excessively high. Our minister mentioned this. We continue with excessively high interest rates and economic growth that is still around 1% or less in 2023 as well as 2024. SMEs, which are Van Holding's customers, are showing past due indexes that we've not seen for 20 years. And in Colombia, we have approximately 20 banks. At least 25% of these are showing negative profits for 2023. This we had not seen for 25 years. And so, to wrap up, and I thank you for the time, major motives to be optimistic, but also major concerns. And one message: it is insufficient to wait for 2030. We need to act sooner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Javier. Well, you talked about the importance of working together, of leveraging capillarity, and the importance of national development banks, such as the case of to reduce capital costs and to do innovation instruments such as guarantees or debt swaps regarding climate that have been growing lately. Let's go now to Andrea Costa Freda. She's Programmatic Director for Latin America and the Caribbean of Oxfam. And let's talk about citizens' engagement and how this translates in that context. Andrea, could you please share with us what are the main lessons learned from the Global Gateway Initiative to foster citizens' participation mechanisms? Thank you, Adriana, and I'd like to thank the organizers to guarantee this seat to civil society and Oxfam. I will cover my 3 ideas in my 5 minutes. Thinking of lessons, this LEO is always also a benchmark for us. This Latin American economic outlook that talks about development is in a context in which our understanding is that inequalities are still one of the important features in this region, that this stems out of a crisis. The crisis has had a differentiated impact. In our calculation, lately the wealth of 105,000 millionaires has grown compared to 70 million people who live under extreme poverty. But these are also multidimensional and intersectional inequalities. When we hear about informality and precarious jobs, that's also differentiated in its impact. The main impact is for women, who are the ones that combine the productive and reproductive work, assuming 70% of the reproductive work. So when we talk about those inequalities should be part of this focus. Now, as to the agendas, the Latin American Economic Outlook is focused on transition and how to fund that. There are three ideas. The first one is that transitions should automatically lead to transformation processes, that they should be able to close gaps. So, well, it's not that evident, not obvious, especially in terms of green transitions. We must be aware of those who are winners and losers in a region with an energy mix that is powerful but still relies very much on fossil fuels, which will generate uh, some tension between transitions and democracy in a very polarized region, and also generating those jobs associated to transitions. This outlook show that these jobs will be very masculine in terms of energy transition. So there isn't much of an emphasis on sectors which have a very impressive capacity to create dignifying jobs for women and to formalize jobs, such as the economy of care sector. The other element is that who pays for those transitions comes from Europe. In Europe, the way out of the crisis was a major public boost in the next generation, where public and debt plans for that transformative boost. Now, the recipe in Latin America is to strengthen foreign direct investment, but with that orientation onto public policy, it is true that the Latin American economic outlook also considers the domestic resource mobilization efforts and also international financing instruments. Let me just give you, because I come from Oxfam, let me talk about the necessary efforts in terms of fiscal efforts. If deficit to fund the sustainable development goals in Latin America are calculated as $650 billion per year, according to ICLAC, the region is losing close to 6% of the GDP in fiscal income because of fiscal fraud. If we apply that to a regional GDP of $5 billion, the region is losing close to $320 billion a year. But if we add to that what we could be collecting in, according to Oxfam projections, it would be $50 billion a year of potential tax collection, just emphasizing on actually taxing wealth, knowing that most of the beneficiaries out of the crisis are those billionaires. We would be talking about almost 60% of capacity to cover with a fiscal effort. But now we know that it is not enough to have only public financing, and we need to talk about private financing and private investment. When we refer to private investment, the effect, the spillover effect that growth and private investment will automatically create benefits is yet to be shown. Let's see what happens we're coming out of the COVID pandemic crisis. What we saw during the pandemic is that private investment in the COVID pandemic showed certain shortcomings in that model. First, in terms of the control of international groups on the technology that is needed to provide public goods, for example, vaccines. And we also saw that the large beneficiaries on the way out of the pandemic crisis were the large entrepreneurial groups. So there wasn't an automatic redistribution of those resources. So when we talk about a global gateway and those international partnerships, and I will cover that with the political policies report. What are the political policies and global gateway and those investment instruments in order to promote development or closing these gaps? Who makes the decisions? Who is being asked regarding the strategic sectors and how those decisions should be made? Are communities part of that decision-making process? Civil society is supposed to be part of that group in the private sector as well. There's an advisory group, but there is not much dialogue among us, and we don't really know what is the mandate. That global gateway instrument, in order to guarantee technology transfer and to guarantee actual reindustrialization, the due diligence principles that European Union just passed will be supporting those investment decisions in the global gateway. Those are questions that we need to ask as a civil society. Let me close with a reference to the economic outlook this year. It talks about productivity, growth, and investment. And if there's a chapter 4, that talks or reminds us of the importance of the public institutional arrangement and also renewing the social contract. Because for us, this is at the core of what a region, a more polarized, politically, economically, and socially, a polarized region. Let's remind ourselves that in order to renew that contract, we need those multi-stakeholder partnerships, but also we need a leadership from the public sector and good politics, as Fernando Carrillo said here at ECLAC. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Andrea, for discussing again that anything that may be discussed or said regarding public policy needs to be focused on improving citizens' well-being. That should be at the core, that are at the core of everything. And about the importance of thinking about this investment framework, both foreign direct investment, public investment, as well as private investment, in a context that is in line with a social contract that favors everyone. We are going to close with Maria Teresa Ruiz Tagle, Executive Director of CLG Chile, Corporate Leaders Group for Climate Action. Teresa, what investment and production mechanisms can bring about more sustainable investment? Thank you for the invitation. Having the chance of being here is always a pleasure to contribute a bit more, because it's being last is not the best here. I wanted to somehow wrap up some of the topics that we have heard about building the right ecosystem for investment. I believe that considers many components. The importance of green taxonomy, we heard about the importance of stability. We should think of certainty. We need to deliver certainty to the markets. We need to build public goods. And the state needs to create those public goods that will facilitate investment, that will facilitate development. Because, after all, what we want is to benefit people. We should not forget about that ultimate goal. Now, from the point of view of the private sector, it is extremely important to take the market signals. What are the market signals? All these elements that I've mentioned are components of the market signals, but I'd like to highlight others that we have not discussed. For example, reportability. In Chile, we have the Financial Markets Commission that has developed a regulation based on IFRS that helps us in reportability, and those are market signals and that are part of the institutional arrangement or structure that is important to guide what we want to do. Now, collaborative work with the private and the public sectors is key. Chile, I believe, is a great example in that sense. In Chile, we have a state policy regarding climate action. Policies start with one administration, but then they are executed in a different administration, and that allows us to be able to make progress. And when we have climate issues, and we face biodiversity issues and pollution issues that will play in the long run, we need state policies. And I'm going to connect this with another element that was mentioned. Climate financing, sustainable financing is important. And once again, we have a very good example, because it's not only about the private sector, the one embarking on theme bonds. So we have CMPC, a paper and forestry company. 58% of their debt is funded through green and sustainability bonds and theme bonds. So it's a major percentage. And why? Because it's good business. It's not greenwashing. It makes business sense. And we want to believe that companies want to do good business for everyone. The same thing applies to the public sector. The public sector in Chile accounts for 35% of public debt in Chile, is invested on theme bonds. and a large percentage of that on bonds related to sustainability, as we mentioned, which are connected to NDCs that are Chile's commitment with carbon neutrality and the Paris Agreement. So it is much easier for administrations to start connecting these things, debt with public policy, with projects, with work areas. We have a climate change framework legislation. We have a long-term climate strategy as well. But Chile's ambition is not only 35%, it's to achieve 50%. And the question is again, why? Because it makes business sense. It is good business for everyone. But I'd like to add something that you mentioned and you opened up that door, which is taxes. We haven't discussed about taxes, and really, we need to discuss about taxes. We have issues, as I said before. We have a climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, pollution crisis. These are negative externalities, and we should promote. Actually absorbing those externalities, negative externalities, and we need to discuss about taxes.
In Chile, the conversation was postponed until next year, speaking about the corrective taxation. But not only because they're important to Chile, but because the EU is here. And so we have the carbon board adjustment mechanism in Europe that has just began its pilot stage. And this is a very powerful market signal. In Chile, if we don't pay the taxes in Chile, we're going to have to pay them in Europe anyway. And so let's open the conversation up in countries. These are opportunities to see where these revenues will go. And of course, we would prefer not to pay taxes because we don't have no externalities. But if we have to pay it, where's the money going? And so I would also like to mention something else regarding taxation in Chile, and that in Chile was already enacted the regulation for the system of emission offsets. And this has led to very significant investment opportunities. Why? Because basically I pay the tax, or hopefully not, because I reduce technology and so on. But if I have to pay, I have an alternative, and that is being able to carry out a project to reduce emissions, and so I can offset it. And that is an opportunity that is very important for investment. So if I link this to the taxonomy with a reportability and collaboration, and all of this leads to a very relevant ecosystem. The same thing happens with Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. The same agreement system, you have carbon markets at international level. Chile had just signed an MOU with Switzerland, for example, and we already have another one signed with Japan. And so the idea is to promote this green investment in Chile, and for the region. And here I keep to Leo because my time is up, I think. But we have a tremendous opportunity. We are part of the solution as a region of these three crises that we were talking about, and that, of course, tremendously affects sustainability. And for the private sector in particular, we are part of the solution once again on account of investment. And so I think that we are in very good standing to build and continue to build towards sustainable development for all. Thank you. Thank you, Maria Teresa. Unfortunately, I believe that with this intervention, we must wrap up with this panel for today. The panel has been very rich, and we have spoken of how to move ahead with investments with an impact not only on productivity, but on reducing inequality in the region. We have spoken of the planning, the enablers in the public sector for that investment in key areas such as digitalization and the green transition. And lastly, the impact of this for citizens. And I would like to thank you all once again, all of our speakers. And now hand over to the Executive Secretary of ECLAC and Ragnar to wrap up.
Word that comes to mind after this wonderful discussion. I have to say that dialogue is a part of the DNA of the OECD Development Center, and this has definitely been a good DNA boost for us. And I will be very brief because everything has been said and you summarized it well. And I just want to thank the organizers for my team, your team at ECLAC, and all of the partners for putting together such a wonderful panel, because multidimensional problems require multidimensional solutions, and this has been a multi-stakeholder discussion on these very important issues. And although everyone has come from different aspects, there's a common thread. We need more investment. We need to make sure that we're doing it correctly, that they're sustainable, that they're fair, that they leave the value added in the region, and that we do it together in an economic, socially, and environmentally friendly way. And that is also the message that comes out of the Leo. So as one of the organizations responsible for that, I'm very glad to see that this is a discussion that comes together, and therefore we can move forward together. Just a couple of words on the next steps, because as we keep repeating, the Leo is not just a report. The Leo is a forum for discussion. It's a forum for partnerships. It's a way to keep the dialogue going, to advance the policies, to advance prosperity. So what we are planning to do in the year that we have until the next one, well, Sebastian, who I refer often to as Mr. Leo, he and his team are starting as of today. Okay, Monday. I can give you that to draft the next one and sit together with partners and member countries of the development center from the region to define the topic for next year. But we have a year to disseminate this report in the region and in Europe with our good partners in the European Union to foster these partnerships and get the message across as wide and loud and clear as we can. So we will be doing that in the months ahead. And again, my biggest thanks to all of the partners for receiving us so well in this beautiful building that someone called a castle, or yeah, a temple, yeah. And to feel the hospitality here in Santiago. Again, my big thanks to the team in Paris, who I know has been following this all along, and we couldn't have done it without you. So with that, again, I started by saying thank you, and I end by saying thank you. Over to you.
Bueno, muy bien. Okay, thank you. The Leo is a publication that's been going for 16 years that is in a very important place as a contribution to diagnostic, to the dialogue, and as we have seen evidence of in this panel, to stimulate this very important dialogue. And as Raga said, it is much more than a publication. It's a dialogue platform, and as it is presented over and over in its different editions, this makes it easier. The one that we look today talks about something that is key: how to build a more ambitious investment agenda in the region with investment rates, a region with limited investment rates, and that are also at the base of that low growth syndrome that the region experiences. And also, it is a region that in general needs to grow its potential development for all purposes, inclusive, sustainable growth, and to achieve the transformations that all citizens aspire in the region. So the way we deal with this investment topic is very broad. It talks about developing that agenda, which depends on having clear strategies regarding productive development. That is to say, some solutions such as sectorial wages. It talks about how to organize cooperation between private and public sector and academia, using clusters and other articulation territorial systems. Talks about responsibilities and public investment drivers, foreign direct investment, and the ways in which these are reinforced mutually. it talks about and discusses the role of investment on research, development, and innovation in order to promote transformation and to transform productive structures. It talks about the importance of aligning those investment and productive agendas and their priorities with national development plans that are very important in one chapter there. It discusses also this whole issue of financing challenges, the role of the financial sector, the development banking system. We received so many good comments there during the panel as well, and the need of developing innovative financing formats. It talks about how investment is a catalyst for job creation and the dynamism of the labor market. It talks about the importance of improving the progressivity of the tax systems and expenditure, as well as a way of mobilizing resources, domestic resources. It talks about the importance of strengthening institutions in order to better link investment with local requirements, the role of international partnerships, for example, with the Global Gateway, and the whole potential that entails in order to mobilize resources and investment, technology transfers. And finally, it talks about the importance of these investment agendas for democracy, for the trust on public institutions and on democracy itself, and for its efficacy, as Fernando repeated, for strengthening social contract and the ways of organizing social dialogue on these topics of productive and investment development agenda, which is quite innovative. We have a tradition of social dialogues for labor topics or for peace matters or macroeconomic topics, but not a long tradition of dialogue for productive development and for the development agendas. I believe that's key. Okay, clearly it is a very thorough report that comprehensively addresses financing issues and challenges in the region. I don't think I've ever read any report that is so comprehensive, with so much focus on this topic, that connects with so many dimensions of this challenge, and all of this as a very important invitation to adopting a broader and more ambitious agenda of investment. So at ECLAC, we're working strongly on this productive development agenda and investment agenda. And I close by saying thank you again to all of you. My thankfulness to those of you online, to all the teams that work on this report. I'd like to thank the distinguished panelists and guests for their important contributions. It's been a pleasure and an honor to host you here, and wish you a Merry Christmas or festivities at the end of the year and the best for 2024. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a todos.
We'd like to thank all speakers and panelists and all those of you who were with us today, both here in the room and online. And those of you here with us, please join us in a coffee break outside the room, and see you soon. Thank you.